The Athenians had a very strong sense that if they didn't show up to the ecclesia, to the council, they might very well find their liberties taken away by the rich, the powerful, the well-connected. They would turn up for self-defense, and if the evidence of the Greek playwrights is anything to go by, they also turned up because they quite enjoyed sitting on juries and quite enjoyed sentencing people to various penalties of fines and banishment. But the ancient world had a very different sort of economy and indeed had a very different kind of leisure life. We have many things we wish to do besides take part in politics, and the idea that somebody should interrupt their career for anything like as much as 3 years at a time would, I think, be thought by large numbers of people to be deeply unattractive. Nonetheless, we could do it. If we did it, we would have achieved one of the things that the Athenians were after, and that is we would give everybody an absolutely equal chance of exercising power. It would, of course, be an equal, very, very small chance. Nonetheless, if one could do it at the national level, one could clearly do it at all sorts of other levels. People could simply be drafted to serve on city councils, borough councils. Parents of children could simply be drafted to serve on school boards and the like. Some people who argue in favour of this argue not so much in the Athenian mode on the assumption that people would want to do it, but rather on the assumption that they probably wouldn't very much want to do it, and simply think of it as an exercise in civic duty. I think one could probably go somewhere halfway between these two positions and suggest that many people would be reluctant at first, but might come to enjoy it once they'd had a little practice. But I think it probably has to be admitted that real democracy, using lotteries in the way the ancient world used them to pick people to serve on governing boards, to serve on ruling councils, to serve in legislatures, that probably wouldn't go down well if proposed to the American people in some kind of referendum. Nonetheless, there is something to it, and I want to suggest one little tweak to the existing system that might improve it. But first I should say what the existing system is. The existing system is really Roman rather than Greek. It's what the Romans recognized as what they called a mixed republic, with elements of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy in it. Familiarly, a president, a senate, and a House of Representatives. The idea being that the decisiveness of one man at the top would be checked and assisted and enlightened by the sage counsel of a small, select body, the Senate, and the views of the common people would be represented by the larger body, namely the House of Representatives. And of course the thought was that these would have different strengths and weaknesses. The lower house would have common sense, the upper house would have wisdom, and the president would be decisive. We, because we did something that the ancient world never did, which was to extend citizenship to every adult, male and female, abolished the distinction between free and slave, abolished property qualifications for citizenship. We, having done all of that, have what Madison, who after all was one of the great builders of the American system, what he called an expansive or a popular republic. Madison was quite clear that he did not want to create a democracy, because Madison was quite clear that a democracy was what the Athenians had, and it collapsed in disorder in the Peloponnesian War, whereas the Roman model was stable and altogether a more reliable way of running particularly a large and diverse society. You might manage Athens with 30,000 citizens, though they didn't in the end. You certainly would do better to have the Roman model if you were going to have 5 or 6 million and eventually 300 million population. Nonetheless, there is some attraction to the Athenian model. It involved everybody in a way in which nothing since has done. So what might one do? A very good idea put forward by a political scientist called Jim Fishkin, who has been experimenting with this for the last 25 years or so. And this is with the use of what are sometimes called citizen juries, but the basic model is fairly straightforward. Where there is an issue to be resolved, you simply select a panel, pretty much at random. You then give the panel a couple of days to deliberate on the issue, as it might be the structure of a school district, or it might be the organisation of public utilities in a town, or on a larger scale, as it might be choosing among various models for a national health system. They are then addressed by proponents of one or other scheme. They go away and talk to each other. They come back. They ask the various proponents of their schemes large numbers of questions, receive answers. They then go away, deliberate again. They then come back and ask further questions, repeat the process again, and then come back and make a decision. By and large, they tend to come to a consensus. Not always, not on everything. They don't become more at odds as a result of discussion. It's not like ordinary two-party politics where the parties seem to get further apart. It tends to result in something very close to a consensus on the best scheme to adopt. Does it have good effects on the people who do it? Let's say, do they become more public-spirited, wiser, more interested in public affairs? The answer appears to be that it has some such effect, but probably only for 3 or 4 months, and like most social science experiments, the effect dies out over time. Nonetheless, the present system with modifications of this kind would, I think, be a good, powerful civic education. And lastly, there is one thing to remember about the Athenians, which is that the reason why they had democracy was because they thought that if they didn't, they would not get fairness. That unless the poor many use their numbers when they vote to counteract the obvious advantages of the well-off, the well-connected and the well-educated, then it is unlikely that the worse-off portion of the population will get a fair share of the social cake.